In this unit, we examine a smell that arrives a moment before the rain itself. The first drops strike dry ground and the air fills with it. Clean, dark, earthy, unmistakable. Everyone recognizes it. Almost nobody can name it. Here is the first surprise. It is not the smell of rain. Rain has no smell. What you are breathing came up out of the ground, and something alive down there made it. 3 questions then. What is it? Why can our noses find it in such absurdly small amounts? And how does a scent buried in dry dirt ever reach your nose at all? Part 1. The word for it. In 1964, 2 Australian mineralogists, Isabel Baer and Richard Thomas, sat down to describe this exact scent for the journal Nature. They found there was no word for it, so they built one out of Greek, from petros meaning stone, and from the name the Greeks gave the golden fluid said to run in the veins of their gods, petrichor, the blood of the stone. It is a magnificent name, and it is, we must gently note, slightly wrong. The ground is not bleeding. Baer and Thomas worked out that dry rocks and dry soil hold onto a thin film of oils, laid down by plants and baked in by the sun, and that water lifts that film into the air. That is part of the answer. It is not the part that matters. Part 2. The thing in the soil. Take 1 gram of ordinary garden soil and hold it in your palm. Inside it are something on the order of 1 billion bacteria, and a great many of them belong to a group called Streptomyces. These are not the round, drifting bacteria of a schoolbook. Streptomyces grow as fine branching threads, spreading through the dirt the way a fungus spreads through bread, weaving a mat through every crumb of it. They are also, as it happens, where a great many of our antibiotics come from. The ground has been supplying the pharmacy for some time, and as they grow and as they make their spores, they give off a compound. It was isolated and named in 1965, and the name is the whole lesson in a single word. Geosmin, earth smell, that is what you are smelling, not the rain, not the rock. A molecule made by a living thing sitting in the soil, waiting, which leaves 2 questions. They are the 2 good ones. Part 3. A nose tuned to trillionths. The human sense of smell has a poor reputation. It is said to be the blunt one, the vestigial one, the sense we traded away for eyesight. Consider the evidence. The smallest amount of geosmin a person can detect sits at about 5 parts per trillion. It is worth being exact about how small that is. 5 parts per trillion is a single drop of the stuff stirred through 4 Olympic swimming pools. A person walking past can tell you it is there. Now you may have heard this compared to a shark smelling blood across an ocean. We will not repeat that comparison here. It is livelier than the evidence for it, and the plain figure is remarkable enough on its own. And once you know the molecule, you find you have been meeting it for years. It is what gives a beetroot its taste of earth. It is what makes a fish pulled from a warm, still river taste of mud. A few parts per billion in the flesh is enough to ruin a whole harvest of farmed catfish. And it is why a glass of tap water occasionally tastes faintly of the pond it came from. Here we are fortunate to have an excellent specimen, a common garden beetroot. Half the people at any table will tell you it tastes of soil. They are not being poetic, they are doing chemistry. Part 4. How a buried smell gets into the air, which brings us to the awkward part of the story. The geosmin is down in the dirt. Your nose is up here, and rain, one would think, ought to wash a smell downwards, not upwards. In 2015, engineers at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology aimed a high-speed camera at single drops of water landing on dry, porous soil. And they filmed the answer. A drop lands. For an instant, it does not soak in. It flattens, it spreads, and it traps a pocket of air underneath itself, pinned against the ground. That trapped air cannot stay there. It breaks into tiny bubbles that rush up through the body of the drop, reach the top, and burst. And every bursting bubble flings a fine mist of droplets into the air. Hundreds of them from one raindrop, each carrying whatever was in the soil, the geosmin and the bacteria's own spores. It is a fizz. Every drop of a light rain is a small fountain, firing the ground into the sky. The mist drifts, you breathe it in, and you say, rain. Which explains something you already knew without knowing why. The smell is strongest right at the start of a shower, on ground that has been warm and dry for days. Not in the downpour, in the first moments of it. Part 5. Why a bacterium would want to be smelled. Which leaves the question a bright student always asks. Why would a bacterium in the ground go to the trouble of making a smell at all? Nobody down there has a nose. For a long time, the honest answer was that we did not know. Then, in 2020, a research team found something rather wonderful. Living in that same soil is a tiny six-legged animal called a springtail, and springtails, it turns out, are powerfully drawn to geosmin. They follow it. They arrive at the Streptomyces they feed, and they leave with spores clinging to their bodies. So the smell is not a byproduct. It is a signal. It is the bacteria advertising, paying a courier in food to carry their children somewhere new. We should be careful here because the bright student deserves it. This is the leading explanation, resting on real experiments, and the story is still being filled in. But the shape of it is difficult to argue with. The scent has a purpose. It is addressed to somebody. It simply happens that the message reaches us as well. The review card, and so we have learned that the smell of rain is not the smell of rain. That it is a molecule called geosmin, made by threads of bacteria in the soil, thrown into the sky by bubbles bursting out of a single falling drop, and caught by a nose that can find 5 parts in a trillion of it without ever having been asked to. The most nostalgic smell in the world turns out to be a message from something alive. The ground has been announcing the weather this whole time in a language written for somebody else. Class dismissed. If you would like another lesson in the world quietly telling you something, our unit on how a snowflake's shape tells you the weather it fell through is waiting on the shelf.